Hey there! Today we're going to learn about structure and properties of water. This is a topic that you find in AP Biology. So, as I teach about all of these concepts, usually you will see me also give you MCQ questions to practice on because AP exam consists of MCQs and FRQs. Sometimes I'll also do FRQs. But today we are going to look at a couple of MCQ questions in structure and properties of water. So, when it comes to water, the first thing you want to know is, well, what does water look like at the chemical level? So I am going to try to draw water molecules down, and then we'll also talk about some important bonds in water, and we'll talk about the property of water as well. Let's go ahead and look at water. So water has oxygen, which you know about. Okay, I'm going to draw the oxygen, and it has two hydrogen. Okay. One important property of water comes from the fact that oxygen is very negative and hydrogen is very positive. If you know how they represent the partial charges here, they put a delta negative and a delta plus or positive. So oxygen has this partial charge, negative charge, while hydrogen has this partial charge, which is positive charge. I'm not going to go into the chemistry really deep, but really what's happening with them is they have these valence electrons, and there's this sharing of electrons, or more like, filling the valence shells that's happening. And because of all of that, oxygen happens to be very electronegative, and as it's taking most of this electrons to its side, you almost see it create like a bend in water. Instead of it being straight, we draw water molecule as a bent molecule. Because of that, it's as if the oxygen's pushing those arms or hydrogens down a little bit more. There's a lot more science and chemistry into that, but what's expected of you to understand in this AP topics, AP Bio exam, is some of the bonding in here. So let's take a look at water as a molecule itself. So water is H2O, two hydrogens and oxygen, and you can see that hydrogen and oxygen has a bond by itself. Okay, that is called a covalent bond. So in chemistry we learned that there are covalent bonds, there's also ionic bonds, there's also hydrogen bonds. So in water, the hydrogen and oxygen have a very strong bond called a covalent bond, which is why we cannot just take a water molecule and strip it apart and just take the hydrogen off of oxygen that easily. It's very, very strong. So you've got to know that water molecule has a covalent bond, but also you've got to know if there is one water molecule with another water molecule. I'm going to draw that here as well, another water molecule. Okay. We also see that there is a hydrogen bond that forms between one water molecule and another water molecule. That itself is a very weak bond. So I put dots to represent that weaker hydrogen bond right there. Remember, hydrogen bonds have to have that hydrogen, and hydrogen being positive, we also talk about in chemistry opposites attract. It's attracted to the oxygen. So you'll see that bond between a hydrogen and an oxygen. Now, how many bonds can a water molecule form? So based on, the water molecule, the way it is in its structure, you will see it can form multiple bonds, hydrogen bonds, with itself, which is why water, you see it exists as the solid form, which is ice, when it's freezing, also a liquid form, and also gas form. To really understand that, you'll have to go again a little bit deeper into chemistry. So another thing you'll have to learn about water here is when it comes to the properties of water, we see that when water is frozen or you have freezing temperatures, it's cold, you'll see water becoming ice. And you probably know that ice floats. AP exams ask a lot of questions. We'll be looking at about that as well. You got to remember this part, that when water is frozen, at the molecular level, water actually forms this crystal structures. And instead of, you'd think that solid means they're more densely packed, but instead of being that way, they're actually making this perfect shapes of, like, crystals, and they're actually more further apart than they are in liquid form, which is why in the solid form, water, when it becomes ice, floats instead of, you would expect something solid to sink, because it is actually in the ice form less dense than liquid water. So knowing all of those things will help you answer some of these MCQ questions. We also have some properties of water, like water being able to bond with itself, the cohesion, or water bonding with something else, like the glass beaker, or, some other thing. That would be adhesion. We also talk about capillary action of water. And you see this in plants, and we'll have a question about that as well in MCQ, so I'll go over that. But these are all the different properties you will need to know. Another really important property AP exams ask questions from is specific heat of water as well. And let's take a look at the first question here in the MCQ section. So the first question here, you see it says the water molecules in ice are further apart than those in liquid water. So they even gave you that information. So the ice floats, preventing the escape of gases from the liquid water. Which of the following models best demonstrates the arrangement of hydrogen bonds between adjacent water molecules? Let's look at A here. All right, you see one water molecule, another water molecule having a bond. That cannot be right, because there's a hydrogen and another hydrogen where they're showing it's bonding. Can't be right. Let's look at the second one. Okay, the second one is showing that there's a water molecule, another water, and the oxygens are bonding right there. Also cannot be right. That's both very negative. And then C has a weird picture of a water molecule as well, like one and another one over here. So there's one right there, there's one right here, and there's like an oxygen hydrogen bond over here, and then also like a hydrogen hydrogen bond over here. Also can't be right. D has to be the correct answer, because you can see the hydrogen and the oxygen, this is positive, this is negative, has a bond, which is what water has with another water molecule. That's a hydrogen bond. So the correct answer here would have been D right there. All right, let's look at another question here. So this one has got to do with what I was talking about with one of the properties of water, where water can not only bond with itself, but also bond to other stuff as well. That really comes down to polarity. That's something very important in its structure that also contributes to all these properties of water. Polarity means that hydrogen being very positive, partially positive, and oxygen being partially negative, these two almost like polar ends, opposites, are attracted, and you see this bond. But also this partial charge is what's enabling them, or water molecule, to be able to form these bonds with others as well. So not just with itself, water and water, but water with something else as well. You easily see this in when you put water in a glass beaker, or some sort of a container, and you see that the water is trying to climb almost on the edge. It's a little bit higher. You also see it in straw. When you hold a straw in water, you'll see it's a little bit higher. It has this climbing ability almost, but really it's because water is bonding to either the container, which might also be polar. So this is another thing to remember, is water being polar will be attracted to something else being polar. And you can almost assume that if water is attracted to something else, it has to be polar. So the polarity is another really important concept to understand in AP biology. So this question here is saying that in vascular plants, water flows from root to leaf via specialized cells called xylem. Xylem cells are hollow cells stacked together like a straw. A student explains that evaporation of water from the leaf pulls water up from the roots through the xylem, as shown in this figure 1 or picture. Which statement describes how water is pulled up through the xylem to the leaves of the plant? So here they have a model that gives so much information. They're even showing like arrows going from the roots to the top of the tree, which is in the leaf where photosynthesis takes place. And they're also showing how from the leaf water is lost through evaporation. And they're zooming into that leaf area to show the inside where you also have like those molecules of water leaving through those pores we call stomatas. You also zoomed in the structure of the stem part of this plant to show that there are these cells, this structural part of the stem, which have something called xylem. Xylem are like vessels that will transport water. We also in plants have phloem, which are known to transport sugar. This question deals with xylem. So in the xylem, you see that the water molecules, which are in the model as little dots, they are going up against gravity. You would think that's not quite possible without using some sort of energy, but here water is going up against gravity. Why? It comes down to its ability to form that bond, the hydrogen bond, and as well the polarity being attracted to the walls of, in this case, xylem, being able to climb up that way against gravity without any energy at all. So in this question, again, what's really happening with the choices that will explain how water is pulled up through xylem? Let's read it. So here's choice 1, or A. As water exits the leaf, signals are sent to the roots to pump more water up to the leaves. Now it was starting fine because water does exit through the leaf. But when you say signals are sent to the roots, where did that come from? It's not like they have some sort of communication through, like we do in nervous system. And why in the world are they going to pump water? It sounds like there should be a pump in plants to take water up, because how are they doing that? But they don't. They're actually using the properties of water in order to maintain this ability of plants to pull water up. So that can't be it. There's no pumping going on, so no. What about evaporation from the leaf? Because he did say evaporation was the reason, but this is saying evaporation from the leaf decreases the hydrogen bonds that form between the water molecules in the xylem. That's not right information. Although evaporation is driving a lot of these things, it's not like evaporation is decreasing those hydrogen bonds that's forming, and that's the reason water's going up. That's not really right. C is saying evaporation again of water from the leaf. This time they're saying increases the hydrogen bonds, and also totally not right. Evaporation is not the reason where they're increasing hydrogen bonds, and that is also not providing energy for transport. Let's read D. As water exits the leaf, hydrogen bonding between water molecules pulls more water up from below. That sounds right, because water does exit from the leaf, and there's hydrogen bonding going on between water molecules. So water has to bond to water in order for them to travel up. And also water has to bond to something else as well. So, in this case, xylem. So hydrogen bonding is the reason between water molecules that pulls more water up from below. That sounds right, like the correct answer for you in this question. Here's another one of those water property questions. This one talks about the density of water in a solid liquid form and so forth. And here's how the question goes. As shown in the diagram, um, when environmental temperatures drop below freezing, a layer of ice typically forms on the surface of bodies of fresh water, such as lakes and rivers. Which of the following best describes how the structure of ice benefits the organisms that live in the water below? A lot going on here. So they told us that freezing temperatures, ice forms on the surface. They're telling us that information. Now, what choice of answer here would really explain that? And they have a nice picture given as well. And also, they're saying how do like organisms benefit that live down in the water. So let's look at the choices here. So A says the water molecules in ice are farther apart than those in liquid water. So far true. If you know what happens in ice, water kind of spreads out further apart because they're forming those crystalline structures. So the ice floats. That's true, ice floats, preventing the escape of gases from the liquid water. Um, Okay, so far everything was true, but preventing of the escape of gases, we might have to look at that because what do they mean by that? That's not quite making a lot of sense, especially with this question. Let's keep reading. The water molecules in ice are closer together. Well, we can eliminate that. It's not closer together. Ice is farther apart. So I'm going to skip B. C says the water molecules in ice are farther apart. So I'm going to read that because it does sound like it might be going somewhere. The water molecules in ice are farther apart than those in liquid water. So the ice floats. And here's the explanation for that. It says it floats, maintaining the warmer, denser water at the lake bottom. That might right there help explain why, organisms in water like the fish is surviving even though it's really cold. And this also ties in another property of water of specific heat. But let's keep reading though. So C seems like that does explain this quite well. What does D say though? The water molecules in ice are closer together. Again, I'm not even going to read the rest because that's wrong. So I would circle C for this particular question. All right, that's all for today, and we will learn about macromolecules next.